Okay, we'll go ahead and kick things off. So thank you all for joining the Provar Spring 24 Release 2 webinar. I will be your Master of Ceremonies today, Michael Dailey. I'm the Director of Technical Product Marketing here at Provar. I'm joined today by Samuel and Robin, who are the VPs of Product and Technology of Salesforce Apps and Test Automation, respectively. And today we have a very packed agenda for you as we're talking through our Spring 24 Release 2. First of all, we're going to be going through our Provar Manager 3.1 updates. Then we'll talk about some new features and updates that are coming for Provar Automation, some exciting stuff in there. And then we'll have a preview of Provar Assistant. And lastly, we'll have a Q&A to close. So feel free at any time to leave your questions in the Q&A box inside of Zoom, and we'll get to those at the end. And just a brief note, we are doing this webinar as a bit of a preview. Provar Manager 3.1 is generally available now. Provar Assistant set to be generally available at the end of March, and the Spring 24 Release 2 for automation is scheduled for the spring. So just a quick update on that. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to Samuel, who will go through our Provar Manager updates.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, let's jump onto the first slide. Thank you. So this new version 3 of Provar Manager, and 3.1 to be more specific, it's packed with new features and a redesigned and rethought through way of experiencing release management and test management and test operations. So here we have many features on the screen, but the main one is that we've split Provar Manager into 3 new apps instead of having everything into one app, which could get confusing and it wasn't clear who was meant to be using it. We split into more logical categories like release management, test management, and test operations. And I'll talk about that later. The second most important thing is the Provar Manager API. So with Manager 3, now you have an API that all the systems outside of Manager, outside of Salesforce can call. We'll also dive deep into that later on. Other than that, we have improved our AI capabilities. So we have smarter AI, especially for root cause analysis. So the preliminary analysis that you get right now in Provar Manager 3, you will notice that they're more on point and they actually provide more useful recommendations on how to fix some of the issues that you might encounter. We've also upgraded the AI models we were using for test case generation, so now it runs faster. And I think we've also upped the number from 5 to 10, so now you get 10 test cases, and it's also a feature that we continue to have in our mind, how can we improve it in the future. Other than that, we have a new test project navigation UX. So since the beginning, we've relied very heavily into the Salesforce experience, the line-in experience, which is mostly what you get when you use Salesforce. Yes, we did add some components to make certain processes and activities a bit easier. But one of the issues that we had from the beginning was navigation. How do you navigate through projects, to plans and test suites and test cases? And it was too clicky and people could just get lost very easily. So we've worked to improve the navigation experience. And with Manager 3, I hope that people will not feel lost and will be able to always understand what they're looking at. We've also improved the way that you manage test suites within test suites, what test cases are within test suites, that kind of thing. We've improved Quality Center, so it runs faster now. We've also improved Apex code coverage reporting, so it's more scalable. We had some customers that were running thousands of unit tests and getting a lot of information back from those. So we had to make it more scalable to be able to, capable of running and importing information about as many unit tests as you have running. Something interesting, we've added alerts. So if you have a job that's running to run, let's say, your unit tests or your Provar test cases, now at the end of those, either if it succeeded or if it failed, you could trigger email alerts to the recipients that you decide, or also you could post a message on a channel through Slack. Other than that, we've also updated documentation and training courses to reflect the new UI and the new features and capabilities of Provar Manager 3. And in relation with the integration with Provar Grid, which is our cloud service cloud offering for testing in parallel on multiple operating systems and browsers. We've included support for Bitbucket Enterprise, Server, and Cloud. So if you're using Bitbucket, now it's the time to start getting your hands on Provar Grid. And also we've added support for multi-environment testing in case you want to run a particular branch of your test project against multiple different environments. So let's move on to the next slide. To give you a brief overview of how Manager looks like, as it's been split into those 3 different modules. Let's start from the bottom. So Manager is built on the Salesforce platform, and that comes with a lot of advantages. You have built-in analytics, automation, personalization. You can build apps within it, great security and privacy features, and you can integrate with everything under the sun. On top of that, we have some common features, like you can define and describe different people and team members. You can install plugins, so to connect to DevOps tools, to connect to code quality tools and release management tools. We have some AI capabilities like the ones I mentioned before, and some analytics like Quality Center. And then the way of thinking about the different modules, I think, is a very natural way of progressing. So the first thing that you do as a team is to manage your work and plan it ahead. So that's what release management is for. And here we're aiming to provide similar feature set comparing to Jira, for example, especially for those customers that don't use anything else, or what they use is not mature enough. So you can track your projects, your issues, the releases, and sprints. It's also a placeholder. So if you have Jira or Azure DevOps, you can use that plugin to bring in that information into the release management module. Then we have test management, which you may be familiar with, where we have everything else almost. So test projects, sweet cases, all of that, everything that has to do with planning, designing, and executing, and looking at the results. And then finally, we have test operations, where you can define your environments, your systems, your connections, your repositories, your pipelines, your schedules, your code scans, everything that is more on the operational side of things, running things, finding the results, is now in a different application. Okay, let's continue. Thank you. So this is one of the components of the new test project navigation user experience. And hopefully it feels familiar to all of you, especially if you use Provar Automation, because you will be used to looking at a tree of components. In automation is based on your file system, and here is based on your test project. So at the top, you see the test project. So I'm not looking at the header, I'm already looking at the tree. So you have the test project. Within that, you have test plans. You also have a category for test suites, and you may have test suites that are not within test plans. So we try to have everything here so that you can quickly find it, and you can quickly understand the hierarchy of your test suites or your test plans and so on. Now, the good thing is that this same component is present on the test project, test plan, test suite, and test case records, so that as you move through your different records in the test project, different parts of it, you don't lose context of where you're at, and you can still look at your test project as it is. So you will see at the header, it tells you, well, this is a test case, this is the name of the test case. And then you have some actions. You can refresh this view, you can edit, clone, delete, as you would usually. But you also have some object-specific actions. So not only you can create, you can see them, you can update them, you can delete them, but you can add, let's say, test cases to test suites. You can remove test cases from test suite. You can remove test cases from test plans, test suites from test plans. So basically everything that you have here, you see a drop-down, then you will find some object-specific actions. And finally, to make it a bit more intuitive, it also has drag and drop functionality. So you can, from here, drag a test case and drop it into a test suite, and it will be moved there. You can drag and drop a test suite into another test suite to define a hierarchy, or a test suite within to another test plan. So we try to make a very intuitive UI, and everyone that has been using it so far really appreciates that. It helps them to understand what they're looking at in the context of the test project, and they are able to navigate through it much easier. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So here, I wanted to dive just a bit into the API. So when I mentioned the API before, you may have ignored what I said, like, I don't need an API for. What do I need an API for? So if you're using any system that is not Salesforce native, so for example, AutoRapid, GearSet, Azure DevOps, pipelines, or GitHub Actions, now with the Provar Manager API, you have the ability to trigger your tests through Manager. So using authentication like API key or auth 2.0, you can run tests. You can run tests by a specific test plan schedule that you may already have prepared beforehand, or one that you reuse again and again. But the interesting thing is that depending on the context, you may be in the process of deploying certain changes to a branch. So you're doing like a pull request, maybe you're making changes to your Apex code. Here you can say, I wanted to run the tests just related to my Apex code. So you can run your test plan filtered by, in this case, metadata components. You may be in the context with the knowledge of a particular user story you're working on, probably especially if you're on Azure DevOps. So you have a branch for a particular feature of user story, or in this case, work item, I think it is. So with that information, you can ask Manager to run the tests related to that particular issue or work item. So it goes quite granular, and it doesn't assume that you always know what test you should be running. So that's where Manager's intelligence comes into the picture. And then, as you see on the right-hand side, you can call your Provar test cases and run those on Provar Grid. You can run Apex unit test cases on Salesforce, or you can just call any external API you may have, maybe a Jenkins server running something else. Finally, you get the look back, get the results, and from your pipeline, you can call the API again to get the request status. So yeah, I think it will be very helpful for those that are using external systems. Finally, just to give you a bit of an idea of what we're working on right now. So coming soon, in the next release, most probably, we'll introduce the concept of personas in relation to test cases, and being able to test the whole test suite related to a particular persona, like a salesperson or a customer success representative, for example. We are getting our eyes into helping you write better test plans, and we're looking into using AI to assist you with that. Also, we are thinking of bringing better reporting around test case runtime, so that you have an idea of what's the average runtime for a particular test case. And we're also looking to improve some test management reports that some customers are interested in. Finally, we are thinking of improving our Copilot integration. We have a plugin that integrates with Copilot on some of our customers, and looking to benefit from that. And in relation with the integration with Provar Grid, we will be supporting environment variables. You will have a better view to understand what's happening in a particular job. And we will also help you to validate that the connection you set up with Grid is valid and working. So that's all from my end. If you're interested, please drop a question or get in contact with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. We'll hand it off now over to Robin, who's going to go over our updates for Provar Automation.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Great update, Samuel. Okay, so let's get on with Provar Automation with the first slide, please. Cool. So we've heard to the customer feedback, and first and foremost, there are performance improvements. Phase one, so metadata download and org browser loading is up to 25% faster for specified orgs. The results could be better in your org. We've upgraded to Selenium 4 so that we stay current with the latest technology and are at the cutting edge of innovation. We've done undo and redo enhancements to Pge Objects. This is to resolve a pain point around the Pge Objects undoing or redoing actions. From our instrumentation perspective, we have added, if a project is GUID-fied, number of connections, license type, and system information. We have also updated the SF jar as per the latest Spring version 60, so that we are concurrent with Salesforce releases. So those are some of the new features and enhancements. Moving on to the next slide, please. We've started addressing a long-standing request by supporting the highlight panel component support. As we can see at the top, it says Provar Custom Object 3. So that is now supported as a standard mapping. And that is a very frequently requested feature. And now it is done by Provar Automation. Next slide, please. We also now introduce the support for commonly used dynamic actions. As we can see, it is here as an example. The new group button is the dynamic action which is mapped via test builder. It not only supports the fresh mapping, but it also works with legacy actions that are now updated to dynamic action without any changes in the scripts, so that your scripts run fit and fine with all the releases from Salesforce and from our side. Next slide, please. Let's talk about NitroX. So we've also made some very exciting updates to our NitroX offering. First and foremost, a quick refresher. As all of us know, NitroX is our component library. So rather than you building page objects, we provide you with a library of components to map a lot of LWC related elements on the UI. By doing so, not only we get the superpowers of reusable components, we enhance the performance, the locators are much more robust and smart. They are highly flexible and the maintenance is reduced. We also have a small box which says up to 5x faster than page objects. And in my own personal opinion, it can even go up to 10x faster. So that's a quick refresher on NitroX. Let's move on to the next one. So how do we populate the NitroX common library? Via Provar, us, the customers or partners, all of them move into a NitroX package. We publish them to a repository or marketplace. And from there, via over-the-air updates, as part of the latest releases for Provar, our users and customers get to the latest packages for NitroX. So that's the distribution mechanism. Moving on to the next slide, please. With the latest release for Provar Automation, we provide now a new custom UI for JSONs so that we can do more clicks and less code. As we can see on the UI over here, it's very simple to interact with. If you look at the example at hand, we are looking at an account name field. And on the right-hand side, we can see that has a certain label, a tag name, a type, and a few parameters. Now, as you can see, this is a whole lot better than writing page objects by hand. So bygone are the days of complicated JSONs and files, and comes the new UI for NitroX. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Not only can you interact with the NitroX components via the UI, you can also add custom interactions. So for example, we have the account name. You cannot just write the fields and the attributes, as we'll see in the next one. You can also write implementation for interactions. So here we can see there's a small text box which says JavaScript snippet. So if you would like to go from the low code side to the whole right end of the pro code side, even that is possible with Provar and NitroX. You can write a JavaScript interaction as you might deem fit. Let's move on to the next slide. As I was highlighting in my previous section, you can not only add interactions, you can also add attributes. So for example, if you want to add a certain attribute for account name, for better identification of that web element, you can add things like name, tag, so on and so forth. And NitroX will smartly pick up the best suited locator for that web element. By doing this, not only you get more control over the web elements, you also get a lot of flexibility and lower maintenance, because NitroX smartly picks up the combination of values and ensures that even though the Salesforce UI changes or maybe a change has been done by a developer, Provar can still identify the web element with 100% accuracy. So that's the sort of superpower that we get by adding attributes. So let's move on to the next one. Thank you. Okay, this TDX was all about AI. So we've cooked up a little bit of AI in our product as well. Launching Provar Assistant. And next slide, please. So it's a RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, RAG-based chat application, so that you can get all the answers about Provar at your fingertips. As we can see, earlier today, I asked Provar Assistant about NitroX. Tell me more about NitroX. So you can interface with this chat app in natural language. There is no if then else kind of talking. It's as natural as it gets because it's based on top of large language models. And then Provar Assistant beautifully responds back about the features of NitroX, highlighting pieces like reusable components or extensible framework and so on and so forth. You can ask literally anything about Provar, ranging from features to issues to your own nuanced use cases. This has been trained on our support and documentation from the website. So in my view, it definitely has a lot of knowledge which can make your life easy. This will also be coming very soon as part of the spring release, and you can have a sneak peek at assistant.provar.com. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin and Samuel. Exciting updates there. Really loving the focus on user experience and performance there with this update. So we're going to switch now over to some question and answer time. We have some Q&A already in the chat, so we'll just kind of go through these questions here. So starting from the first one here, we had a question come in around Provar Manager. The question is, when will Provar University have updated training for Provar Manager 3.1?
I don't have a date, but I know that the team is working on updating the new modules according to the new documentation. So I'll ask the education team if they have a date.
Thank you. We had another question come in here asking about the difference between defects and issues. I think this was during the Provar Manager segment. So maybe again for you, Samuel.
I know, it's also confusing to me sometimes. So because we were looking at Jira, and I don't know why they also chose to do this, maybe because it was essentially initially an issue tracker, and then it grew into a release management tool. But yeah, it's mostly based on Jira's naming convention. So they call everything an issue, and you have issue types, which essentially can be epics, user stories, bugs. So a defect is really an error, something that went wrong, and that sits in Manager. Whereas an issue, it can be any of that, epic, user story.
We had another question come in regarding Provar Manager here. This is relating to the upload metadata coverage. The question is, upload metadata coverage to Provar Manager. How does this help us? What things can we do with this metadata in Provar Manager? For example, if a developer checks in a change to a component or Apex code, can Provar Manager automatically kick off our existing automation scripts, which include that component or Apex code? Great question.
It is great question, actually. So here we go into the realm of how does your tester and your developer work together. Your tester may not come into the picture until things are being pushed into the QA environment, and that's when they see things for the first time. But what if you have in-sprint testing? So your tester works alongside with your developer, has actually access to the code they're developing, and is able to create their test cases at the same time that your testers are maybe working on the unit tests. So the test cases they're working on have access to that metadata that has been changed. And when you sync that with Provar Manager, we say, okay, so this test case has that metadata coverage. So that by the time you want to merge that feature into the upper branch, you can not only run your unit tests, but you can run your Provar tests. That's probably the most advanced you can go with testing. You cannot shift more left than that. So maybe that's what you want to try to aim for, to have your tester working alongside developers as soon as possible, and for both their test projects to be ready by the time you want to test. Otherwise, at some point, your tester will get their hands on what has been developed. So maybe it's not the feature going into SIT, maybe it's from SIT to QA. At some point, your tester will have access to that metadata. As they create the test cases, they will link those test cases to that metadata that's maybe new. Manager will know about that, and then further from that in the pipeline, as you move through UAT and then production, then is when you can run the test cases based on metadata changes. I hope that makes sense somehow.
And I would just add a little to Samuel's points there. Because Manager is built on the Salesforce platform, you're free to utilize flows to accomplish a load of different functionality that is not, native to the platform itself or native to Provar Manager itself. So that would include kicking off grid test cases and test plan schedules from changes to metadata that are linked to test cases as well. So yeah, good question there though. There was a question that came in. It looks like this is another Manager one. Is there any impact on the license model for Manager given the changes?
No, we're not asking for more money. You get all of it in the same license that you have right now.
Short and sweet, like it. There was a question also for an integration with Salesforce DevOps Center. I believe that's already in Manager today. So there's a plugins in the setup menu for Provar Manager where you can install the integration with Salesforce DevOps Center. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Samuel.
Yeah, it mentions the CI/CD. So at the moment, we provide a template for a flow where the idea is that we will trigger some test cases off the back of a work item going into review, I think is the stage. So as it moves into in review, you are able to trigger those. We provide a flow template so that you can clone and modify, but essentially it's more for you to understand how you can trigger test cases off the back of something happening in DevOps Center.
Looks like we had a question come in for NitroX. So for you, Robin, have more actions been added? Example, double click, clear, etc. Similar to all other options when using Pge Objects and standard Salesforce actions, other than just assert and click.
Yeah, we haven't actually added double click and clear, for example, but that is definitely on the roadmap. With the extensible power of NitroX, that is something we definitely want to add pretty soon to the list of actions that we can perform.
We had another question come in for NitroX. Is there a demo for setup of NitroX Attributes? Good question.
Yeah, definitely. We can do demos. Also, with the launch of these new UI features, we will also add content to the University of Provar so that not only can people get demos, they can get certified on these new pieces.
We had a question related to Provar Assistant. It says, is Provar Assistant based on Provar documentation?
Yes, definitely on Provar documentation and much more. As we said, it's a large language model. So we have not just trained it on this small set of data. We try to train it at as much data as we can get.
We had a question come in here from an old friend. Is there an up certification for Provar Grid?
I think there's one, isn't it? I think there's one. And I think Jen is also somewhere here, so she can put something in the chat. I believe there's one.
Yeah, we definitely have one for Provar Manager. We'll have to double check on the Grid one for sure there. There was a question around NitroX here again. When mapping a field using Test Builder, can we use NitroX instead of ProvarX for faster element identification, especially when it comes to custom fields?
Yeah, so technically, NitroX uses ProvarX. So when you are using NitroX, it inherently uses ProvarX, and therefore it can do faster element identification. And since we provide a lot of components, HTML5 or LWC, so it becomes a whole lot easier to map via NitroX using ProvarX.
Excellent. We had a question came in here. Where can we see a demo of how Provar actually runs tests? This is someone who's just new to Provar. They want to kind of see how that testing process works. We do have demos available on our website. You can also go to our YouTube channel where you'll see various different demos over the years of Provar, but we can definitely follow up afterwards if you're looking for something specific. Okay, we had another question in here for the metadata coverage aspect of Manager. So the question is, this upload metadata coverage to Manager resolved more around the idea of all future regression testing. I'm not sure if that's a question or if more of a statement. Anything to add there, Samuel?
Some development has to have happened for the test case to be created. Like you wouldn't create a test case without the development being there. But you wouldn't use it for regression testing, because regression testing, you're not testing on the basis, I mean, you don't care what metadata has been changed. You test everything. And I mean, what we do provide, and especially in the future with Provar DX, a new version of it, is that depending on what makes sense to test, we will help you to test just that. It doesn't make, at the early stages of development, it doesn't make sense to test everything because it hasn't changed. So if it was passing before, it will pass now. You didn't change that area of the application. So what we do provide is that based on what changes you're making, then we give you tools to just test what makes sense, which is the user journeys, the test cases that interact with those things that you changed. They are more prone to fail. That's something else that you didn't touch whatsoever. And then as you progress further and further into production, you probably want to test more and more and more. By the point you're about to reach production, you test everything to make sure. So metadata allows you to do that. But yeah, there comes a point where you just want to test everything.
Excellent. And we had another question in here related to NitroX. So this one looks like it's for you, Robin. It was related to a previous issue where it was defaulting to Pge Objects. The question is that going to be addressed in this latest release?
Yeah, 100%. So we found out that issue for our product, and we have fixed that with the upcoming release.
Awesome to hear. Any more questions? Any last minute questions that we have while we have everyone here?
I can see a couple of them. I don't know if they appear to you, Michael.
Oh, we had a question around parallel execution.
Yeah.
So the question is, for parallel execution, we are using execution licenses as our test suite is growing. It's taking about an hour to complete test execution. Would there be any chances to free up the dependency on execution licenses or providing additional licenses without cost or less cost?
I feel like that's more for customer success to have a conversation with them. So if they are interested in taking more advantage of their licenses or executing things in parallel, what's the most efficient way of doing it? Definitely reach out to your customer success representative.
Excellent. Okay. Looks like that's it for our questions for now.
So I think,
oh, sorry.
I don't know if you see, I see one, but I don't know if you can see it. I can read it out. Our application is community UI, so Lightning Experience community. And the way it is customized does not capture metadata. We're currently going through the Provar trial, and it's not easy for us to create test cases, even using NitroX. What would be the more optimal way to overcome this problem? So testing of communities. I know, Robin, if you have anything there, you can.
100%. So definitely community or experience cloud. So it does not have metadata coverage for a lot of places. And that is where we feel that NitroX is the optimal way. But looking at this question, I believe some components for that experience or that implementation have not been covered. So what we'll do is we'll start looking at it in a very focused fashion so that we can verticalize that stack and cover community or experience cloud end to end. Now, while we can't cover all the components in the universe, maybe there are some custom components and all, with the NitroX UI, we'll make it seamlessly very easy for anybody to create their own components or representations for web elements. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, that looks like that's all of our questions now. Again, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar for our Spring 24 Release 2. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll be closing the webinar now. Thank you all so much.